Matthew 2. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star as it rose, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time that the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy. They entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
So I'm going to apologize in advance because I got lovely pictures, half of which you'll be able to see. This is one of those things ironing out the kinks. We got this great program, but until it actually gets projected on the wall, sometimes we're not sure how visible certain things are. And it turns out that some of these, like star in the sky and stuff like that, are going to be a little bit dark, so you'll have to imagine how amazing the picture is. Can we do that? Let's just agree to imagine that the pictures are awesome. Okay? For those who don't know this about me yet, I was born in Ottawa, and I grew up there, which means naturally that's where I learned how to drive. I don't know if you've ever been to Ottawa, but it is a city of 1 million people. They designed the roads poorly. I'm just going to say poorly. There's basically one major thoroughfare east-west, and the city is built east-west. And so every day, twice a day, for many hours, it's mayhem. The way people drive in Ottawa tends to be very aggressive, and it's a fun place to learn how to drive for the very first time, let me tell you. More than that, I actually became a driving instructor while living in Ottawa too, which added even more challenges. And it's incredible to me. You would think that in a city like this, with the way that people drive and the immense volume of traffic, that you'd be very dependent upon the signs and what have you on the road that are supposed to guide us. But the reality is, like anywhere else, people naturally come to sort of drive on instinct, right? You know where the stop signs are near your house. You stop you don't look for the sign. You know what I'm saying? Like you start getting into the rhythm of driving, and you just go through the motions. You follow what other people are doing instead of paying attention to what's actually happening in signage and things like that. Most people do it, especially in places where they're familiar. And this was never more apparent to me than when I moved to Sussex, New Brunswick. So Sussex, New Brunswick is a tiny little town with, 4 cars. No, there are more than that. But it is a really small place, and it is at a much slower pace than what I was used to. And of course, being a different place and a different culture and a different province, they have all their own habits and traditions and things that they're used to. So, only after, a couple of days of being in Sussex, Tracy and I are driving down Main Street. This is downtown Sussex, by the way. Just wanted to give you like the meat of the town, right? So that's like the real busy section. Anyway, we're driving down this main street. There's like, 3 roads? So we're driving down Main Street in Sussex, New Brunswick. We're minding our own business. We're going to the bank or the grocery store or something, and we're having a nice little conversation. When all of a sudden, this guy walking down the sidewalk, in one motion, he turns, puts his hand out, and walks into traffic. Right? Like that. He's in front of my car. Right? And with 2 feet, I mean literally with 2 feet, and it's a standard, I stomp on the brake, screech the car to a halt. And literally just inches away from this guy who's now got both hands extended, preparing for the impact. It was amazing. And you should have seen the look on his face. Like he was clearly aware of how close I came to killing him. You know, like it was shocking. Anyway, so naturally, with such a close call, I go back to campus, and there was another, people were starting to stream in for the beginning of school, and there was another fellow there who was also from a large city in the States, and I was telling him this little story about, like, I couldn't believe it, they walked in and tried, like, I literally almost drove over this guy. And we had a little laugh over it, close call and all this stuff, and then he gave me a real pearl of wisdom that kind of shook me. He said, yeah, you know, man, you really got to watch the signs around here. See, there are a number all over Sussex, a number of unlit crosswalks. They don't put those lights that we have here, those wonderful yellow lights that, hey, somebody's walking. I love that. Gives you lots of advance warning, right? No, they have a little sign with a dude walking. That's it. And people, this is what they do in Sussex, they just put their hand out and they walk. They don't look at the cars, they just walk. And people who live there are used to it. People from Ontario, kill those people. I'm just saying. It was scary. Anyway. Yeah, man. You really got to watch the signs. So I got thinking, signs are what show us what's ahead. Signs show us what's coming up. God has provided signs for us since the beginning of the very first age. He has always spoken to us and revealed things to us in little bits so that we can know the important things that were coming. You know, usually we talk about the wise men, this passage that Tracy read for us. We usually talk about that towards the end of Advent because the wise men are actually pretty much the last people to see the baby Jesus. And contrary to what most nativity sets would have you believe, the wise men were not there the night he was born. They showed up about 2 years later, and if you listen very carefully to the passage she read, they go to the home where Mary is living with Jesus. Doesn't even mention Joseph. But all that aside, even though they were so late in the story, late in arriving to see the baby Jesus, they were perhaps the first to take notice. They were among the very first because these men from a different culture in a different place of the world, they looked for the signs of the king's coming. The first sign in our story this morning was the sign of the star. It's the one that we're most familiar with, right? This is the one every time you hear anything about the wise men, they usually depict 3 guys on camels with crowns and a big star in the sky, right? We know about this star. We hear about it all the time. But there are some things about this that are actually kind of wow. Yeah, so you really can't see that, can you? You see the star, though. What's incredible about this is that these men were from some faraway land in Asia somewhere. They were foreigners. They weren't part of the Hebrew culture. They had no prophecy about the coming Messiah. They weren't sitting in anticipation for their Redeemer. They weren't those people. They were from somewhere else, living lives that were about something else. When suddenly a star appeared in the sky, and from afar, they looked up at that sign and they said, "What is that?" And they began to study. And perhaps they came across prophecies that had been written down. Perhaps even if these men had been collected, they're known as magi, so they were mystics of some sort, or astrologers. So they probably collected these materials and held on to the information. But it doesn't say, we don't know, the scriptures don't tell us. But whatever it was, they looked at a star in the sky and they said, "What is that?" And they began to investigate. They knew that the sign pointed to something important. And we know that because these magi, these wise men as they're called in the Bible, and there may have been 3, there may have been 30, we don't know, it doesn't actually say. But these men left their homes at great risk of harm, at great expense to themselves and journeyed what was, 2 years on foot across the world to see this thing that the sign in the sky was indicating to them. That's huge. They saw something that others did not. You ever been there? Do you ever notice something in the midst that everybody else just kind of missed? I used to watch these traveling roadshow type, you know what I'm talking, like Antique Roadshow or whatever it's called. They have a bunch of them. The BBC has all kinds of stuff like this where people go through the junk in their attic and they bring all the garbage to people that know stuff. And they say, how much is my garbage worth? And the guy says, that's like $200, right? And it's like, wow, I never thought that I can literally uncrumple it now. And yeah, so sometimes it's really cool, the stuff that they pull out. My great-great-grandfather had this and that and all this stuff. Well, I remember, I was watching the show one day, and I couldn't find a picture of it, but there was a guy who came on he was at a garage sale. This is what made it so cool for me. So he's at a garage sale sitting on a table, or a yard sale, or whatever, right? And there's people everywhere, and he says, I'm standing there while my wife is shopping or browsing or whatever, and I look over this table and I saw this, and something about it made me go, There's something about that thing, about that toy. It was a toy. And so I went over and I negotiated a low price and bought this. Well, it looked like garbage. It looked like junk, right? Like this ancient, I don't know how well it was made, but it just looked like an ancient toy that I would have found in a cellar somewhere. You know what I'm saying? But he bought it. And he bought it because there was something about it. As he looked at it, there was this nagging feeling inside of him, and he knew that there was something about this. He had to have it. He had to take it home. His wife, what are you doing? He even said how his wife had repeatedly tried to get rid of him, and in fact had thrown it out once, which he saw and took it back and hid it in the garage, right? Because there was something. He didn't quite know what, but there was something about it that he knew was important. He knew it, even if nobody else did. And so here he had this opportunity because the Antique Roadshow was coming through town or nearby or whatever. And so he actually came from out of town and drove all the way to where they were having this thing. And now here he was on the show, sitting in front of a appraiser to talk about this toy. And this toy specialist goes through the history of how this toy actually belongs to what is now all but a lost set of toys from, the turn of the century or before. They were the popular thing, and they're so very rare now, and considering the condition and quality of the item he had, it was worth anywhere up to about $100,000. He just knew. He saw something that nobody else saw. And because he was watching, because he paid attention to the sign, to that tingling in the back of his, the hair stand, I don't know what it was that he felt, but because he paid attention, he reaped a huge benefit for that. These wise men that you, once again, cannot see, they knew that the star represented something huge. They knew it was something of great value, so they followed that star with courage and commitment and faith and commitment of resources. This Christmas season, we too can walk the way the wise men walked, keeping our eyes on the signs. We can walk with great faith. We can walk with great courage and commitment of resources, partly because we know what the sign points to. We know what the sign means. But the second sign in this passage is the sign of the prophet. Now sometimes we don't catch this stuff when we're reading through the scripture, so I'm going to read this one again. Starting in verse 3, as Tracy read it, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this. So these magi come and they meet with the king and they tell him about the coming Messiah they're trying to find because they were following this sign. And it says, King Herod was deeply disturbed when he heard this, and everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law, and he asked, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? So he's checking with his wise men. right? Of course, they say in Bethlehem, in Judah, they say, for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the ruling cities of Judah, for a ruler will come from you, who will be the shepherd for my people Israel. Then Herod called a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. To verify this story that he's hearing from these foreigners that have come into his palace, he calls upon his wise men, who then consult the prophecies that have been handed down. The reference is from the prophet Micah. And together with the word from the prophet, word that came from God ages ago, a sign that he had placed in their midst years and years and years earlier, to prepare them, to warn them of what was coming, combined with the star that had hung in the sky that these men had followed, together he began to understand what was going on. When he began to look at those signs, he discovered what was actually happening. Right? Ding! Like a light bulb went on. You know, in a way, prophecy is like getting insider information, kind of. It's like an advanced warning about a big event that's about to happen, right? Getting in on it early, right? I'm not talking about insider trading. I'm just talking about getting information before something happens so that you can be there waiting and watching so you know it's coming and you're ready for it. I remember a great many years ago, back when I was still, doing the rock star wannabe thing in Ottawa, and I was heavily ingrained in the music scene in Ottawa. I had a lot of friends who were in the industry. Record producers that I knew, a lot of musicians. I knew people that worked for the CD warehouses and the HMV, which doesn't exist anymore as far as I know, and all these things where you go buy your DVDs and your CDs. I mean, I knew people that were in the industry. And one day I was talking to a friend of mine, and he tells me that Peter Criss, who's the drummer for that rock band Kiss, was coming to town, but he was playing at a small club on the other side of the river in Quebec. It was this tiny little venue. And he said, you've got to watch because there's going to be an advanced sale of tickets, right? And they're going to go fast. So you've got to watch. They're going to go on such and such a day. I don't remember when it was. And he told me. And they were going to sell it fast. Because a concert like this, I mean, in the size of Ottawa, 1 million people, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of morons like me that would actually go to that show, right? Who would do just about anything to go to a show like that. And yet the venue sat maybe 600 people. So there was this anticipation, but because of the early warning, because I had that information in advance, and I was literally sitting, chomping at the bit, waiting, when are those tickets going to come on sale, I got them as soon as they came online. And I was able to go to the show. And there were a lot of my friends that couldn't go. Too bad, so sad. The arrival of Jesus had signs, many signs that had come before. God had given these signs. For years, He had given these signs. He spoke through the prophets, giving insider information of what was about to come. We still have insider information. Not just about the birth of Jesus, you understand, but God is still giving us signs about what is still to come. Are we watching those signs? Are we paying attention so that we can see when the big event is going to happen? Are we paying attention to the signs as we're on this journey of faith? You see, there's still more to this story that has yet to happen. And if you'll watch for the signs, you can get in on the big show, too. Now, the third sign and last sign we're going to talk about today in this story is actually the sign of the child. Jesus himself, the baby, lying in that manger. See, the wise men had seen a sign in the sky, right? And that star, it motivated them. They saw something in that star, and they followed that star, and they went for ages. They walked, I don't know, that's incredible. Walk across Asia to go to the Middle East, right? Crazy. But they did it because they saw something of great value in that. With great sacrifice, great expense, they journeyed to Bethlehem. And their courage and their sacrifice was affirmed when they met in Herod's court. You can't really see that one either, right? Well, that's Herod, the one's been talking. All right? And when they hear again the prophecies as spoken by Micah, given to them by the wise men of his court, that was affirmed for them. And this final sign was arriving in this moment where they actually got to bow down and worship the Christ child. Isaiah 7 and 4. I love this sign. I should have mentioned it earlier, but this is the Isaiah 7 and 4. It was up there. I don't know if you could read it or not. Hundreds of years before Christ was born, the prophet Isaiah spoke these words. He said, "The Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel," which means God with us. These wise men had a chance to bow down and worship God in the flesh. See, the point has always been relationship. The point has always been about that connection. It's always been about our coming to a place where we can have a real relationship with God. Not just know who He is. It's not about, God's big, man. God created everything. I know all that stuff. No. You should know those things. But that is only so that we can have a relationship. Yes? Relationship. It's been the entire point since the beginning. That's why Christ came. To fill the gap. To bring forgiveness for our sins. So that we can be reconciled to our Creator who is too big, too pure, too holy for us to just bring that and lay it down in His court. And Christ cleans us of that. So that we can have this. And this child in a manger, this infant God coming in flesh in such a humble, fragile, delicate, and vulnerable way, it shows us something else. It shows us a sign of His love, isn't it? What a sacrifice. Why? This is God Almighty. He doesn't need to do this. But He loves us. Loves us greatly. Relationship is about really knowing the other person. Relationship looks past differences. It offers mercy, grace, hope. Relationship is a sign of love. We have an opportunity to demonstrate love in the Christmas season. And I hate to say it, but just because we're Christian doesn't mean we demonstrate love at Christmas time. It doesn't. We got to be intentional about it. Right? Because I'll tell you, everything ramps up at Christmas. Shopping becomes awful. Right? Especially if you don't like doing it in the first place. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Right? Traffic is mayhem every day, every single day. Everywhere you go, everybody's out. Right? You have too many things to do. There's work parties, and you got to get something for people at the office, and then there's church stuff on top of that. And oh my goodness, what about family? And then we got relatives coming, and what's that all about? I mean, can't they just stay home this year? Right? Christmas can be mayhem. This season, it weighs down on us sometimes. And if we're not being intentional, if we're not actually being deliberately loving, chances are we may not be loving at all. That's true. I'm talking about me too. Like, I got to pay attention. Because I get tired at Christmas time. Right? And I go out and I go shopping and I'm impatient. I just want to get out. I don't want to be here anymore. I hate shopping. Can I say that? I hate. We went to the mall. We had a meeting at the mall with the Celebrate Recovery fella from Deepwater, Sean, amazing guy, on Black Friday. I didn't know it was Black Friday when I went. I didn't know that. I was at the mall on Black Friday. Oh, somebody slapped me. All right. We've been given a sign of the relationship that God desires with us in this tiny little baby born over 2,000 years ago to demonstrate the depth of His desire for us to know Him intimately. In that relationship with Him, we can be a sign for others at Christmas. That's part of why we celebrate Advent and build up to the birthday. It's so that we can be reminded to do these things and be these things. You are the light. This the light of man, right? You're the light of Jesus Christ in this world. Can we be that? Discover Jesus again this Christmas and embrace the hope that He offers of being in relationship with Him. And if you think you know Him already, there's still more to know. Right? I've been married, I've been with Tracy even longer. We've been together almost 20 years, and I'm still learning stuff about her. I know her better than anybody on the planet, and I still learn new things about her. I'm willing to bet that if we embarrassed them and had them stand up right now, I'll bet you that Jed and Betty would say the same. Right? Because there is still more to know. When you're in a relationship with somebody, it is always growing. It's always moving anyway. It's either forward or backward. You get to choose. I hope you choose it forward. Right? And there's always more. I'm amazed that after all this time, I find there's such an incredible depth to my wife that I was only scratching the surface of all these years. Jesus is infinitely deep. There's more to know. All around us, we see the signs of Christmas. Everywhere we go, man, they've been in the stores since before Halloween. Yeah? Man, that's annoying. All right. Celebrating the birth of Jesus is a good thing, but the truth is, Jesus didn't tell us to remember His birth. He only told us to remember His death and to watch and wait for His coming again. You see, we have signs. The signs that we have, we may see the signs of His birth, but we were told to remember something else. And we have signs of that. The cross, for example, is the sign of Jesus' death. The fact that it's empty reminds us of the sign of the tomb, which reminds us it's the sign of His resurrection from the dead. And the final sign is Jesus descending again from the heavens when He returns. The question today is not, do we understand the signs of His birth? Even if this season reminds us of that, those signs are important in understanding that Jesus is King, but the birth of the King has already happened. Instead, we should be asking, do we understand the signs of what Jesus has accomplished? And are we watching for His return? Let's watch for the signs of what is still to come and shine the light of hope for others this Christmas season. Can we do that? Let's do that. We're going to invite the worship team to come back up.